How are you doing? Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be starting in about a minute or so. I just need one more moment just to get some things situated. I appreciate you all coming. We'll be starting off with remarks from Mr. Derek Mims on behalf of Cal State University Dominguez Hills. And then after Mr. Mims, we'll be going straight into our program, okay? All of you have an agenda within the tote bags that you have. And you also have an agenda for day 1 and day 2. So just go ahead and whenever you feel like it, just take a brief look at that. Please, come in. All right? All right, great. So at this moment, I'll be bringing up Mr. Derek Mims on behalf of Cal State University Dominguez Hills. Following Mr. Mims will be Assemblymember Mike Gibson. Thank you.
Good wood.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to Cal State Dominguez Hills, Toros.
Yes.
My name is Derek Mims, as mentioned. I'm here on behalf of our president, Thomas Porum, and he couldn't be here today. And believe me, he would want to be here today. All his favorite people are here today. And he wishes me to express to each and every one of you, have a great conference, get the work done, and to let you know that Cal State Dominguez Hills is your home. This is the home for you, your family, and your communities. The reason you're here today is dealing with issues that can be solved right here at Cal State Dominguez Hills. Many of those issues. And the president really wants to thank Assemblymember Mike Gibson for putting this together, for having that vision, and to want to make a difference and showing that leadership that he always shows. And I'll take a moment personally to tell you, at one point, my teenage cousin had been victimized and was trafficked on Figueroa. She was only 14 years old, suffering from autism. Mike Gibson called me and my family at the Compton Sheriff's Department to find out if we were okay. And because of his efforts and those sheriffs, we found her, and she's home today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And that is real, and that is what you deal with every day. And so that's why I'm very thankful for all the law enforcement here, all the community organizers, community leaders who make a difference in our communities. And that's what Dominguez Hills is all about. President Parham always wants everyone to know this is the campus of accessibility. Inclusion and equity begins here. And when you go out there and you're doing your intervention and your prevention, the first words out of your mouth should be Cal State Dominguez Hills, not UCLA, not USC, because we have an 80% acceptance rate. UCLA has 14%. You can come here and transform your life. It happens right here. And so to get you guys started, I'm going to teach you the new Toro sign. It's not hook 'em for Texas. This is, everybody raise up, put those up front. That is Toro Nation right there. Welcome. You are part of Toro Nation. Have a great conference.
I want to thank Brother Derek Mims. We've been knowing each other for a long time. We appreciate the welcome on behalf of the president of Cal State University Dominguez Hills. I am Mike Gibson. I proudly represent the 64th State Assembly District. And those are areas of Watts, Willowbrook, where I was born and raised. So I am not ashamed of where I was raised. So Watts, Willowbrook. I represent Compton, Carson, Wilmington, North Long Beach, Linwood, Gardena, and also Torrance. And the reason why I take it slow like that, because I want those cities to sink into you so you'll understand my trajectory. Born in Watts, mom and daddy and sisters and cousins were 8-9 family bloods and Crips, East Coast, and the whole 9 yards. So I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. So I understand to some extent on what's going on. I say some extent because I don't live in the neighborhood I grew up in anymore. I forgot to tell you, I was a police officer. I was the first and last African American hired, watch this, in the history of the Maywood Police Department. I said first and last. Maywood Police Department, many of you know, LA County Sheriff's are in the room, you know that Maywood Police Department no longer exists today. The department was taken over by the LA County Sheriffs. And so I've seen some things in my life. I've seen, when I was on patrol, little Jose, who was shot in the head, him and his girlfriend sitting in the car in July in 1991. Just listening to music in front of mom and daddy's house. And his girlfriend was hysteric, and I was rolling down the street, and I put the call out. And then I ran to the passenger side, and I pulled him out of the car. And all I heard was him gargling in his own blood. Somebody just walked up and tapped to the window and shot him in his head. And I stayed, Brian, I stayed with him all night long over at the Big General Hospital until the doctor came in the room and said, we have no brain activities. And the family had to make one of the hardest decisions, is take their child off of life support. But he was already gone, even in my arms, with his eyes open. And I felt helpless. Oh, I forgot to tell you, on April the 5th, 2020, my second child, walking down the street off 89th and Hobart, right one block west of Western. Him and his fiance walking down the street and saw Gary, who they knew was part of his family, and was talking to him, decided to keep on walking after they spoke to him. Well, 3 guys and 1 girl rolled up and started blasting. My son was shot twice in the back. His fiance was shot in the leg. Gary was killed at 51 years old in his car because he couldn't get out. And there was another man who was shot in the hand. Oh, I did say that was my second son. See, my first son was killed by a hit-and-run motorist, who she's still at large today. He'll be 35 years old. Oh, I did tell you that I was a state assembly member, right? I did tell you that I was a police officer, right? So what I just described to you is that gun violence is no respecter of person. It doesn't care who you are, the title, who your mama, who your daddy is. And so when I come here today about it takes a village, damn it, it takes an entire village. And you're part of that frontline village in this room. We cannot do it ourselves. I am tired of getting the phone calls from law enforcement, whether it's in the city of Carson, whether it's LAPD or High Patrol, saying that some young person had just been murdered in a drive-by shooting. I am tired, Khalid, of going to funerals. Mr. Gonzalez, I am tired, you hear me, of burying our potential. And guess what? These are black and brown children, kids, that look like you and me in this room. And so I just couldn't just pass policies and not do anything and get the phone calls and feel that everything is okay. I cannot get immune to Channel 7 and 9 and 13. And I'm going to talk about talking points. This is my talking points. But I just can't get immune to hearing this stuff on the news and not feel a sense of purpose or a sense of helplessness. So when I do something like this and the things that I've done in carrying legislation, it's because I expect a significant change in our community. I expect that. And I think that each and every one of you expect us who are in policy making positions, you expect us to do our job and try to decrease what plagues our community. You expect that. And some people, again, I understand this is not some people's ministry. This is not some people's calling. And I understand that. Do the environment stuff, whole 9 yards. I'm cool with that. You know, do healthcare, I'm cool with that. But public safety is something that, what keeps me up at night? Let me tell you what keeps me up at night is a knock at the door. Mr. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, I got some bad news. Your son was just killed in a drive-by shooting. Or the coroner's office. Can you please come down to the coroner's office? We think that we may have someone that may be connected to you. Can you identify the body? That's what keeps me up at night. We just had a shooting, a mass shooting in Sacramento. 6 people who should be here are no longer here. 12 people are injured, and 1 or 2 may pass away because of their injuries. So this is what keeps me up at night. And I think every parent, if you never got that phone call, thank God. But if you've gotten that phone call before, you understand. If you got a cousin or brother who died prematurely due to gun violence, you understand. If Kathy, if you got a nephew, parents of murdered children, you understand. So today we're here because we have some soldiers who are on the front line, and I want to thank each and every one of you, my special guests. I want to thank our partners, and save your applause. Some of my partners who've been on the call with us for over a month trying to plan this is Hope and Heal Fund, community-based public safety collective, UC Davis Violence Prevention Research Program, the nation's National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, Live Free, Urban Peace Institute, Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, The Promise, and also Enterprise LLC, the Council for Government Justice Center, the California Wellness Foundation, who's one of our sponsors who helped underwrite this event, and we thank them. Cal State University Dominguez Hills, SBCC, which stands for Strengthened Base Community. Those are our partners, so would you please give them a round of applause. I would like to also recognize our great policy leaders, the city and the county agencies, my colleagues, my friend. I'm going to have her to come up in a few moments, who wanted to say, Mike, whatever you're doing here, I want to replicate in my community, and you will hear from Assemblywoman Mia Bonta, who's here. Let's give her a round of applause as she will be coming up soon. I believe without a vision, the people perish. And I believe leaders, and each and every one of you, whether you have a title or not, you have to bring people in your vision. And so certainly, I'm grateful to having the mayor of the great city of Compton, Mayor Emma Sharif, who is here with us. So let's please give her a round of applause. In addition to that, we have the Los Angeles County Probation Department, Dr. Alfonso Gonzalez, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the Los Angeles Police Department. We also have and want to thank some amazing organizations. I see Supervisor Holly Mitchell, I'm going to bring her up in a few moments, but she's here. We also have some amazing organizations, the Brady Campaign, the Gifford Law Center, Moms Demand Action, the Council for State Government Justice Center, Everytown for Gun Safety. Again, let's give them a great round of applause for working and being part in this space. Lastly, I want to thank all of you, because you are the boots on the grounds. You're the interventionists, the preventionists. You, again, the Los Angeles County that makes up so many great organizations and departments to help prevent gun violence. LA Grid, we want to thank each and every one of you for working in this space. It truly takes a village. And you as warriors are on the front line helping us in this fight, in this battle. We are here today not because we want to be. I never wanted to be a father who won't bury a child. Never wanted to be a father who son and fiance was victims of gun violence. But we're in this space because if we're not in this space, who will be in this space? Who's going to take up the mantle and run with it? Who's going to tell the stories? Who's going to have the life experience, Dr. Crouch? Who's going to be able to reach the little homies, the big homies, and try to prick their hearts and their minds and say, enough is enough? So this work is not for the faint of heart, especially for those who have, again, recently suffered tragedy in our community. And I talked about what transpired in terms of the 6 people whose lives were stolen, the 12 people who were wounded in Sacramento. It takes each and every one of us, not to mention recent situations where 2 people were shot on the freeway, the 91 freeway in Carson. Then there was 1 shot on the 710 freeway, and the list goes on and on. My heart breaks each and every day when I pick up the newspaper, listen to the radio, or watch it on TV. And I'm very grateful that this president, because of what transpired in Sacramento on April the 3rd, this president, for the first time I've heard, is that he talked about ghost guns. Right? He talked about ghost guns. It is important. We can pass all the laws in California. California continues to lead the way. We've passed over 111 pieces of policies in the state of California. We are the example for the rest of the country. But how many more policies do we need to pass in order for us to save lives? Is 111 public policy piece of legislation, is that enough?
Yeah.
Do we still need to have more piece of legislation? And I would just submit to you today that I think that we may be at our end in terms of Chris Wilson public policy. Now I think it's our turn. It's the frontline interventionists. It's each and every one of you, the warriors who are part of this village. And some of you, for the first time, this may be the first time you heard it takes a village, right? But this is the village, and it's more people who want to be here. That's still part of the village but couldn't be here, and we thank them for being part of our frontline work that we're doing to try to save some lives. And Assembly Bill 1621 deals with ghost guns. The governor had an epiphany with the state of Texas. The state of Texas can pass laws to prohibit abortions in the state of Texas. The governor says, well, we can pass laws to ban ghost guns and assault weapons to save lives. If Texas is going to pass legislation where you can sue people for performing and for getting abortions, private right of action, then to end life, we should be able to ban ghost guns and assault weapons to save lives. And so I really appreciate our governor taking that kind of courageous stand, taking on the gun lobbyists. And I'm going to conclude on this note. This governor is a husband, and he has 5 children. He has 5 children, and none of his children is immune from gun violence. And so he understands that. He understands the work that we're doing right now is saving not only his children, but hopefully other people in California's children as well. And so I commend this governor for taking this bold action to say, give me a piece of legislation, and I'm going to bring up the Los Angeles Police. Yes. I'm going to bring up Los Angeles Police Department. Want to make sure I don't mix it up with the Sheriff's Department. Who's going to... No, Sheriff's is good. But LAPD brought what a ghost gun is, and I'm going to have the captain come up and talk about that. But before I do, I want to bring up my colleague, Assemblywoman Mia Bonta, who hails from Northern California. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes and say a few words.
I knew he was going to take us to church, and then I'd have to come up here, coming from Oakland, and say a couple words after you. Good morning. I'm Assemblymember Mia Bonta. I have the privilege of having Assemblymember Mike Gibson as a colleague of the California Legislative Black Caucus, and he sits actually right behind me. And so when he told me all of the work, and I knew of it, that he'd done in this area around gun violence prevention, and that he was having you all meet to talk about It Takes a Village, I was like, well, if you're going to make a village here, I'm going to figure out what you're doing here, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to make our village larger and take us all the way to Northern California. So that's why I'm here today. And I want to share a little bit about my district so that you know the village that you're connecting into. I hold of representing Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. Our district, we have a population of 29% Latinos, 18% African Americans, and 22% Asian and APIs. The COVID pandemic disrupted everything for us, as it did everywhere. But one thing that it disrupted was the fact that in Oakland, we'd actually been on the verge of having one of the lowest homicide rates ever. And unfortunately, that was a wonderful thing. But COVID turned us around, and in this pandemic, we've seen a rise in gun violence that has been unprecedented. And we're facing that. And now we have this pandemic happening, and gun violence numbers are off the charts. We had 129 homicides in Oakland alone in my district last year. The majority of those were the result of gun violence. I'm sitting here thinking about a little girl who was my girl's best friend. They were soccer mates together. And because of COVID, she felt isolated and she felt alone. And because she was a young black girl, and her parents were immigrants, and they were struggling in the moment of feeling like their lives were in danger because they were black in this country. Her father went out and bought a gun. And my sweet girl, because she was so isolated and so alone, found her way to that gun, and she took her life. So when we talk about gun violence touching every one of us, certainly we've all had the opportunity to know somebody who has been killed directly because of guns. But the reality is now that every part of our village has been touched by gun violence, because we can't walk down the street and not fear that we are going to hear a story, that we are going to hear a gunshot, that we are going to be consumed as a community with the impact that guns have had on our lives. So I'm thankful to be led and guided by amazing people like our supervisor, Holly Mitchell here, who is a senator, and Mr. Gibson as well. This moment, because what I want to do is make sure that the state of California is recognizing that gun violence is a public health crisis.
Yes, yes.
It is now our pandemic, it is our endemic, it is our crisis. And I want to make sure that we're not only talking about gun manufacturer liability and getting these awful things off the streets, these ghost guns off the streets, but I want us to talk about, as a community, as villages across the state of California, what it means when our lives are consumed by gun violence, and recognize that our public health is at risk, that our sense of security, our livelihoods, our mental health, our ability is at risk. And that's the conversation, the next conversation, as Mr. Gibson said, that we need to have. So I'm thankful to be here. Efrain here is working on the legislation that I mentioned, and a part of my team, AB 2253. And we are here to learn, sit with you all as community activists, as advocates, as people who are survivors, as legislators, as frontline workers, to make sure that our village gets so loud that we cannot be denied. So I want to thank you for being with us today and giving me an opportunity to be with you all today. And Mr. Gibson, thank you for being the light in our legislature around us. Thank you.
Let's give Assemblywoman Mia Bonta one more hand. We absolutely thank her. And let me also say this. I appreciate your commitment, one, to be part of this 1.5 day commitment today. It is absolutely important. I don't think really 1.5 days is sufficient, but we wanted to at least have a real family conversation on how to address gun violence and gang violence in our village. And so my next speaker, my next guest, she's no real guest. Certainly she represents this area, the city of Carson, Cal University, Dominguez Hills, as our county board of supervisors. She was a California State Assemblywoman from the California State Assembly. She went to the state Senate, and now she is an amazing leader who chairs the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Would you please help me welcome Holly J. Mitchell, Supervisor.
Good morning. First of all, Assemblymember Gibson, I want to thank you for calling the family meeting, right? Because you know what, when family meetings are called, we know that we have a situation. And I want to thank all of you for showing up to the family meeting. I am happy to see the diversity of people here today, because it's really going to take all of us to bring a real meaningful solution to this endemic, systemic challenge.
Yes.
Because there are far too many vested interests who benefit from the level of violence we currently experience. There are vested interests and industries who benefit when we bring harm to each other. And so I think it's important that we call that out and own our collective individual agency and power and assert that we're going to change that. We're going to call out racism. We're going to call out classism and sexism. And we're going to talk about our sense of ownership and pride in our own communities. Because like Assemblymember Gibson, I'm tired. I'm tired of mediocrity in our communities. I'm tired of acceptance of mediocrity. I am tired of excessive use of force. I am tired of communities that continue to be underserved and don't have the resources they need to thrive and be healthy and be well. I'm tired. And that's why I get up and do what I do every day in my lane as a policymaker, bringing forward policies and legislation. That's our role. Everybody in here has a lane and a role to play, and if we all do it together collectively, we will affect some positive change. So thank you, Chief Gonzalez, for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you, Andrea, for being here, because I am proud to be a new member of the county family, acknowledging the role that the county is really playing in a meaningful way to say that we are going to be a care first, jails last governmental entity.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to not just say that, to be about that. When I came in, Mr. Gibson and I immediately began to have a conversation about the budget. I chaired the budget in the state senate because when I ran for office, I understood that where we put our resources, it reflects what we really, truly mean and value. You all know in your home budgets and your organizational budgets, you pay for first what's most important to you. So it's easy for us to have these catchy phrases, care first, jails last. But if we don't put resources behind it, it's irrelevant. So that's why my lane is always following the money, right? So Mr. Gibson and I have already had a conversation about how we direct resources to the work that we know is necessary and critical in our community. So we've already solved one little problem this morning, and so we'll be following up with that. Mr. Gibson said, we have to do something, Supervisor. I said, well, Mr. Gibson, we are doing something. We all are. The interventionists are doing something. The city of Compton is doing something. Something is happening in all the assembly districts. Something is happening at the county. The question is it coordinated? Is it strategic? And is it enough? So no one gets to say, point the finger here about, we're doing something, you're not. We're all doing something. Is it coordinated? Is it strategic? And is it enough? And I hope that you all will spend some part of your time in today's and tomorrow's family meeting asking yourselves that question, pushing yourselves, and meeting someone that you, in the course of your everyday business, may not connect with and may not meet. When we come to convenings like this, we hang out with our own crew. I'm going to sit with my people I know. I hope that you will break out of that and connect with people that you might not, in the normal course of your day or business, have the opportunity to interact with and meet. So you can hear their story and they can hear yours. That's how we will be strategic, coordinated, and figure out if what we're doing is enough. You all know the statistics. I don't have to share those with you. But what I will share is some of the work that I'm really proud of at the county level. You're going to hear from our Office of Violence Prevention, which serves as a hub that looks at the root causes of violence and how cycles of trauma contribute to violence. The assembly members, said that this may not be your ministry. I'll tell you what my ministry is. My ministry is poverty alleviation, because I am clear what role poverty plays, multi-generational poverty plays in communities, in systems that then lead to trauma, right? So that's my lane. How do we have meaningful conversations about how inequity lies across our county. Mr. Gibson told me a story of a young man who told him, Mayor, that Compton looked like to him a place where you could get away with stuff, and yet Beverly Hills didn't. I said, well, Gibson, let's unpack that. What did he mean by that? So Gibson said, we talked about lighting and just the infrastructure, tree canopy. It just looks pretty. Well, there is nothing preventing us from making sure that every community across LA County looks like and feels like that. Nothing. And if you feel valued and live in a community that looks like that, then maybe that translates into your individual self-healing and what you feel your worth and your value and the value for your children and your children's children. There's nothing stopping us from making sure that every community, some communities that aren't finished yet, get finished. And that can be a part of our conversation and our work in our family meeting and our ongoing conversations that will follow after today. Last year, the Board of Supervisors deepened our investment in the trauma prevention initiatives work by expanding to 4 South LA communities that I have the privilege of representing. And we expanded, again, that critical initiative to 5 more communities across the county. I was proud to share in that work with County Supervisor Catherine Barger, because she got some issues too up there in the valley, right? We have co-hosted listening sessions with the Office of Violence Prevention to provide information about TPI, the Trauma Prevention Initiative, and there are some of our community partners who I see and recognize. I see you, twin, in the audience today. This initiative is rooted in intervention, prevention, and capacity building, and elevates the importance of the work by our community-based interventionists and peace builders. The Trauma Prevention Initiative has been able to decrease violence and build infrastructure for a new approach by investing in community and in partnering across county services, including, again, collaboration, Gibson, Park and Rec, Workforce Development, Law Enforcement, and our Department of Public Health. It's important to build spaces like these to come together to discuss and generate an inclusive and collaborative plan to end gun violence, acknowledge trauma for what it is, and move forward. So we want to continue to engage those who have lived, experienced, and worked in these areas their entire lives, and again, have experienced multiple generations of trauma. So again, as you walk into the breakout sessions today, I hope you do so from a lens that accounts for the trauma and hurt that have been endured for far too long. It's one amazing thing to acknowledge that yesterday we saw the U.S. Senate confirm a woman who looks like me. A woman who looks like me for the first time in this country's history to serve on the highest court of the land. It's another thing to acknowledge that her mere confirmation is only a part of the equation. Because the first thing all the news anchors said today, well, she's not going to change the balance of power on the court, right? So I tried to get over feeling that they were diminishing the historical relevance of her getting there. I'm going to try to get over that. Give me a day. I'll be better tomorrow. But what that says to me is we're going to celebrate her and that victory, and then we're going to roll up our sleeves and get back to work. So thank you for calling the family meeting. We will commune, meet new people, collaborate today, celebrate some of the successes we've experienced. And tomorrow we have to roll up our sleeves and get back to work, because mediocrity is unacceptable. The people who live in our communities, our family, friends, and neighbors, deserve the very best that we can bring forward for them. The very best. So I'm expecting all of you to stand in front of me, alongside me, to figure out these local and global solutions to bring equity, real equity, to all of our communities. Thank you, Brother Gibson, for inviting me. I appreciate you.
Can we give it up one more time for Supervisor Holly Mitchell? We want to thank you so very much for, one, dropping some nuggets and talking about family business and making sure that we remain on task, because after we leave from here, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. And you know, the laborers are few, and so we want to make sure that everyone that's here is rolling up their sleeves and committed and energized and ready to do the work that's ahead of us, because it's going to take all of us in the village. Next up, I want to bring the Los Angeles Police Department up. Captain, would you please come up and introduce and talk about that? Again, this is important for me because, again, this is part of my agenda. I wrote the first piece of legislation, landmark legislation in California's history addressing ghost guns, but there was still much work for us to do in this area. So that's why I'm authoring Assembly Bill 1621. And Captain Carranza, would you please come and introduce and take it away?
Thank you so very much. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Lillian Carranza. I'm the commanding officer of Gang and Narcotics Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. and here with me is one of our subject matter experts on the firearms unit, Detective Pat Hoffman. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you so very much for that warm welcome. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Assembly Member Mike Gibson for spearheading such an important issue that is plaguing our communities today. I do not have to stand up here and tell you how gun violence is plaguing the communities. And it does not discriminate from anybody. And what we're here today to do is a very important task. And I am really looking forward to those breakout groups. We are part of the community. We are here to help prevent this violence. All you have to do is turn any television channel, radio, print, social media. Who are we losing? It's our brown and black youth, males. And it does not discriminate against if they're a police officer looking for a house off duty, if there's a child, if they're your college child that is just going to a game after a game, it doesn't. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we cannot do it alone. We need to work together. As it relates to ghost guns, this is a new epidemic that is plaguing our streets. You hear about them. Where's a ghost gun? When? It's not because they're invisible. It's not because you can sneak them through a metal detector and nothing's going to go off. That is not what it is. What it is an unserialized firearm that you can just order in the mail and build it yourself, and there's no way to trace it to anybody on who purchased it, where it was manufactured. And Detective Hoffman's going to talk about the different kits that are for sale out there. Most of them are coming out of Nevada, of a company called Polymer 80, and they're called Polymer 80 because it's already 80% already done for you. You just have to do the other 20%, do a couple of drills, and purchase a couple of other pieces, and then you have yourself a firearm. Now, in 2020, we started seeing them hit the streets of Los Angeles, LA County, all of California for that matter. We were able to track and recover about 800. 2021, anybody wants to take a guess as to how many we recovered?
600.
Over 1,600. That was a 136% increase. And we are right on pace to surpass that this year. So, you know, we hate it. We would much rather be out there building relationships with the community than holding a crime scene and getting a canopy to give the victim that has just been killed and gunned down some dignity and respect. We do not want to be the individual holding that yellow tape standing between you and your loved one because you want to see what happened to them. We do not want to be the ones making that door knock in the middle of the night because we have to deliver horrible news at 2 o'clock in the morning. We would much rather be out there building those relationships, helping our community. But I think it's very educational and important for you to know what these ghost guns are, what they can do, and for that, I'll give you the subject matter expert. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Detective Pat Hoffman. I'm assigned to the gun unit within the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm going to explain to you what a ghost gun is. As Captain Carranza stated, a lot of people have the misinterpretation of a ghost gun. I always compare it to the movie In the Line of Fire of Clint Eastwood and John Malkovich, where he has a firearm that's undetectable from a metal detector. That is not the case at all. It is a full-blown real firearm that's unserialized and unregulated. So the ATF terminology for a ghost gun is a privately manufactured firearm. That is a do-it-yourself, at-home firearm. The issue that plagues us with ghost guns is that when you purchase a ghost gun or a polymer 80 kit, it is not a firearm per the law. It is a piece of plastic. Therefore, any individual with a mental health crisis, a criminal conviction, subject of a restraining order, can purchase this kit on the internet, no background check, nothing. It'll show up at your doorstep as so. This is a polymer 80 box that we seized in an investigation regarding firearms. Once you get that box at your house, you can go on YouTube. It'll give you a step-by-step process of where to drill. They provide the drill bits in the box. The plastic case that it comes in is called the jig. You place that lower frame for the firearm, as so. In the jig, go through a step-by-step process. Once a hole is drilled, it is now a firearm. You buy a couple more components, a slide, some spring components, trigger components, and you have the completed product here, which is a ghost gun. It is no different looking than a gun you see in a gun store. The difference is this: the frame, when you purchase it from polymer 80, is considered a piece of plastic, therefore no background check. The slide is considered a piece of metal. It is a gun component, therefore no background check. Any one of us right now can jump on Google polymer 80. There's other manufacturers out there that provide ghost gun kits. Polymer 80 within the city of Los Angeles are responsible for 93% of the ghost guns we recovered in the city. Our city is in legislative action against polymer 80, but this is the finished product. It is a firearm. It's no different from what you see. So when you hear the term ghost gun, this is a ghost gun. It is a gun. Now, on a second note, it just doesn't stop at handguns. You can purchase, AR-15, we've heard that term in the news. It's a semi-automatic rifle. You can purchase AR-15 components the same way you can purchase polymer 80 components to build a rifle. So this is a lower receiver of an AR-15. You can buy these on the internet. It is considered a piece of metal. Therefore, as in with the polymer 80, the frame, there is no background check for this. You can order numerous of these to your house, no background check. It is a piece of metal. Until you drill it once, now it's a firearm. The finished product of a lower receiver for a rifle, this one here is the AR-15. This is a ghost gun that we seized in a firearms investigation. It is a completed AR-15. It's unserialized, no background check, do it yourself, put it together at home. And like I said, any one of us can jump on Google right now and Google AR-15 lower receivers, and you will get several companies that you can purchase those parts on, and it'll tell you exactly what else to purchase. The stock, the pistol grip, the flash suppressor, all this can be ordered when they are ordered separately. There is no background check. Anybody can get it. Our city and our organization has taken a proactive step recently. We enacted an ordinance to make these illegal, to own, possess, or sell within the city of Los Angeles. But again, these guns can fire numerous rounds. This is a high-cap magazine for a pistol. This is a drum magazine for a rifle semi-automatic.
How many rounds?
Oh, they can go up anywhere, sir, from 30 to 50 to you name it. You get a 100-round drum magazine. The technology and the advancement of firearms, if you think it, you can get your hands on.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, I heard you very clearly define it as a piece of metal or a piece of plastic prior to the drilling of the first hole. Does it have any other use other than to become a ghost gun?
In my opinion, no, ma'am.
Right, because then I'm wondering, going back to policy making, if even though it is considered a piece of metal or a piece of plastic, if it has no other purpose than to become a ghost gun, then we could deem that in itself inappropriate.
Ma'am, the bottom part is the plastic that's ordered to polymer 80. The top part is the metal.
Is the metal.
That can be ordered from anyone.
But again, if they have, if that piece of plastic can serve no other purpose than to become that firearm, then it seems to me that that in and of itself could be deemed illegal.
And the NRA, when in 2017-18, when I wrote Assembly Bill 879, banning and prohibiting the lower receiver and the frame, that was their argument. They said, and they testified that it's just a piece of plastic, it's just a piece of metal. And so, but we know once you drill, it becomes a gun, right? And so AB 879 talks about the lower receiver and the frame, and my bill 1621 addresses that.
Go on, Gibson. No other purpose. It can't become a broom. If it can't become anything other than a gun, then that should in and of itself be allowed.
Are you allowed to purchase ammunition without a background check or anything like that?
No, ammunition, you're going to go through a federal firearms license gun store when they have an instant check.
So like with the registration, right? Because I'm thinking like you are, the serial number is going to be where on there? Because the serial number registers the firearm, and the firearm is also modifies a need for a registration number, right?
So when you buy the parts separately. Go ahead.
Well, like, if I own a handgun and I need, the slide gets damaged, I order one to replace it. So when I can order a slide, same thing like, right, the hammer, firing pin, all that stuff. I mean, it's clearly meant to eject a round. But so how do you decide, I legally own a firearm, I need to replace a piece. So how do I determine that the registration number for me makes it a registered firearm versus piecemealing it out like ghost guns, right? Because the drum magazines generally are illegal anyways, aren't they?
Yes, high cap max.
Right? So, I mean, I think that's where, how do you determine the definition or where the registration, because I noticed they have a barcode on that box.
Yes, but it doesn't have a serial number.
Right.
So that is the difference. This doesn't have a serial number.
Right.
Your firearm that you purchase legally has a
It's got
serial number.
So my thing though is like in this piece of plastic, in this legislation, sorry to go this route, but like, that's what, right? Shouldn't these plastic pieces require it doesn't matter if it's a plastic piece, I make legislation that says my plastic piece needs to have a registration number too, that needs to match that barcode that I bought from Polymer 80 online with my credit card, it's all traceable.
If it has a serial number stamped on it, and you register and go through the process, and you're clear to own a firearm, then that's separate. But right now, they have no serial numbers. That's why they call ghost guns, because you don't know who bought them, who made them, who owned them last. So,
Because like the receiver, right?
If,
I could be making like a toy gun with that plastic.
right,
So that's how they're getting away with it, right?
that's how they're
Slide's a
doing it.
slide, it's metal, right? When it has to be heat resistant, all that stuff, so.
Right. And so my Assembly Bill 1621 is doing cleanup right now to address the very issues that you've brought up. Again, one of the things is that the plastic 3D printers, you can make that using a 3D printer. And you don't have to order it. You can actually use a 3D printer. And so we try to look at policies to even address 3D printers. Again, our laws have not caught up with the technology that exists. And so it is our desire, as well as my colleagues, to do everything that we possibly can to address our laws and making sure our laws are now speaking to the technology that exists. Because 20, 30 years ago, this wouldn't have even existed, right? But it exists now. And we absolutely concluded that factually, that this is taking and killing people on a daily basis. And again, can you imagine going through TSA? There was one man that was stopped. We could not arrest him because he was plastic. But we knew exactly what he was using, what he was transporting.
Did he just have the receiver part of it?
He had to hold the plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going through TSA, and if you had a little drill, and you're in the back of the plane,
Yeah.
think about it.
So TSA allows all that as long as it's parted out.
Well, that's why one, again, TSA is regulated by the federal government, right? And so we have to do everything we possibly can to making sure that the federal government, who has responsibility on a national level to address these issues. And I was happy that as I indicated, that the president for the first time talked about within the past 48 hours, ghost guns. But we're going to get into discussion. We can take this a whole different direction. But please put your hands together and thank the Los Angeles Police Department. Thank you very, very much. Team is saying we need to get on track. So again, thank you very, very much. I want to bring up Andrea Welsing with the Office of Violence and Prevention. Would you please come up and let's give her a round of applause. She's going to give us a great presentation.
So, good morning. I'm in recognition of the time, and that was just so fascinating and horrifying at the same time. I'm going to speed it up a little bit, but really what I'm here to say today is, first of all, thank you to Assembly Member Mike Gibson for your leadership in this area and for bringing us together. Supervisor Holly Mitchell, it is just a pleasure and an honor to work under your leadership in the Office of Violence Prevention. And it was a pleasure to meet new people like Assemblywoman Miabanta and Mayor Sharif. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go through it quickly. The PDF files are available. We want to make sure it gets out to you, so we share all of this. Very briefly, because to get us back on track, I just want to share that a little bit about the Los Angeles County Office of Violence Prevention. We are housed in the Department of Public Health. We were established in 2019 by the Board of Supervisors exactly for this purpose of coordinating the efforts. The board recognized that there has been good and deep and groundwork in terms of violence prevention in LA County for a long, long time, but that there was really a need to coordinate these efforts through a centralized office to bring us together. And so I want to share a little bit about the office and the work that we do, really highlight the Trauma Prevention Initiative, which Supervisor Mitchell referenced. And more than anything, I want to say we are your partners. We have whatever resource that we have available we want to share with you and support the work that's being done in community. And so more than anything, I want to convey that, and I'm going to share a little bit. So, and I don't know, can the lights be turned down a little bit here so that people can really see? So as I said, we were established in 2019 by the LA County Board of Supervisors, and we were really established. Our mission is to build collaboration, capacity, and partnership to prevent violence in all its forms countywide and to promote healing. And we want to do that, and we do that with an equity lens and a trauma-informed lens. You heard it mentioned that, when people experience violence and they have trauma, if you don't do something to heal that trauma, it can just lead to further violence. We were established and really baked into our budget, our $3 million budget. We were allocated $3 million a year for 2 years. That funding is about to run out. We hope and we believe that it will continue, but we want institutionalized funding for this office because, as you know, as you do this work, all the one-time funding in the world is great. I'm going to close out with the American Rescue Plan dollars, and that's wonderful, and we're grateful for that. We're grateful for funding that's coming to us for crisis response and TPI expansion, But this work takes time. It is about building relationships. It's about sitting in community. It's about understanding what's there, what are the strengths in that community, and where there are gaps and where we can walk alongside to build strategies that will really help to prevent violence. So we, as part of the office, when we stood up, because really important to us is the process as well as the strategies. It's not only the what you're doing, but it's how you're doing what you're doing. And our work is really grounded in lifting up survivor voice and working with those who are most impacted by violence to work in communities in a local, place-based way to build the strategies to prevent violence and to promote healing. So we are guided and governed by a Community Partnership Council, 25-member group of individuals, and they govern and oversee our work. They hold us accountable and as well as the communities in which we work. And we also are governed by a 30-member department, county departments, 30 county departments, and representatives from departments like mental health and workforce development and Department of Children and Family Services. So this is our governance structure. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data. And you all know the data because you see it and you've been hearing about it in the news. But this data just shows trends over a 10-year period of time. And what this shows is both suicide, which was referenced by Assemblywoman member Mia Bonta, and homicide. So that when you look at these lines, and the blue line is suicide, and suicides actually supersede homicides in LA County and have for a while. But what you'll see in this slide is that we are slowly, while suicides are going down, homicides are going up. That's the red line that you see here. And in 2020, there were 691 homicides, and that number we know is creeping up. Next slide. Gun involvement in violent deaths. And again, we participate in the National Violent Death Reporting System, which looks at every violent death in LA County. We use multiple data sources, including law enforcement reports, coroner data, and death certificates to look at the detailed circumstances of each death. And here's a slide that just shows that where there's gun involvement. And you can see here that in all suicides, guns were used in 31% of the suicides, more deadly, but in homicides, 73% of homicides there was gun involvement. And here to the right, our epidemiologist Isabel has broken down the percent of suicides involving a gun by specific circumstances and the percent of homicides involving a gun by specific circumstances. Okay, next slide, please. So we know that we've seen an increase in violence in LA County, and it's no surprise given the ghost guns that we just heard about. But homicides rose 41% in LA County, and gun homicides rose 39% in LA County in 2020 compared to 2019. Huge increase. You probably saw it in the news as well. And the number of homicides in the first quarter of 2021, 227, was 54% higher than the number of homicides in the first quarter of 2020, and 67% higher than in the first quarter of 2019. Troubling trends, troubling trends. Next slide, please. But what we know about these numbers, and again, this was referenced by the earlier speakers, is violence in LA County is not equal. It's not in every community, and that we know that disproportionately young men of color are impacted by violence, that communities where there is a divestment in resources, where there's higher levels of racism, where we see the pandemic has had the greatest toll, these are the same communities that are disproportionately impacted by violence. And because we have limited resources in the Office of Violence Prevention, our work is informed by where is the greatest violence, where are the highest rates of violence. We want to target our limited resources in those communities with the highest rates of violence. Next slide, please. A public health approach to violence prevention, and I'm just going to go over this one slide. There's another slide here too, but again, I want to be mindful of time. Really, when you look at the public health approach to violence prevention, I mean, it is based on the data. It looks at risk factors and protective factors. It is a comprehensive, multi-sector approach, and it really, we believe, it needs to be centered on those who have been most impacted by violence. But really, the essence of this model is that we focus on root causes of violence. You cannot have a healthy tree if you have income inequality, if you have racism, if you have discrimination, if you have lack of access to housing and food. You will not have healthy communities. You will not have individuals who will be able to thrive. And so really our whole approach is that we want to go upstream wherever we can. We believe in intervention and prevention. You need to do both simultaneously. We need to go upstream though, but we need to go deep and address the very core roots of what causes violence in communities in the first place. So next slide. Next slide after this. So I want to talk a little bit about our priorities and our strategies. And just so you know, here's where we are here, and this is where we're focused. We have, in addition to that budget for the Office of Violence Prevention, I do want to say this, is that we have a budget that's larger than that $3 million. That $3 million a year for the office is really important, and we need to have sustainable and ongoing funding for the office, but it doesn't comprise our whole budget. The downside of that is that of our $15 million budget, only a very small fraction of those dollars, $2 million, are ongoing sustainable funding. You cannot do this work with one-time, sporadic, funding with restrictions or requirements. This work requires ongoing funding. The funding, and this is why we're really advocating strongly right now for TPI expansion dollars and OVP dollars, because these are our 5 goal areas. We have 5 goal areas. You only see 4 up here. Really our big goal areas, and this was done, our strategic plan was developed in partnership with community, our county and community partners, but we believe you need to support children, youth, and families, and we have a number of strategies in that category. Foster safe neighborhoods, create a culture of peace. I mean, we're talking about how do we reduce violence, how do we invest in communities, but also how do we create a culture of peace, and how do we build infrastructure and capacity for trauma-informed and healing-centered care? How do we ensure that our systems, starting with our county systems, are trauma-informed so that when people come for services, they are not looked at like what happened to you, like are in blame, but what was the context? Why are you, what happened to you actually, instead of a different framework. And then our last goal area is increasing access to community and culturally relevant data. We use data to inform our work. We realize there's a lot of limitations with data, and really, though, we want to share that data and we want to build capacity for evaluation and support, because it's really important as we do this work that we also understand the impact of that work. Next slide. So over the next 3 years, 6 priorities, again, really local and place-based efforts. Baked into the funding for the office is funding to support lead agencies in every service planning area to establish a regional violence prevention coalition. We also want to create an open data portal that anyone has access to, and it's not just about the data and the numbers, but that open data portal will also have stories to show the impact, because it's not just the numbers, but it is the lives that are affected and the families that are affected and the brothers and mothers and sisters and fathers that are affected. And so we want to show data in a different way. Trauma Prevention Initiative, it's where we started back in 2015 with the first funding by the board at that time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is an evidence-based model. It has shown great impact already. It shows promise, and now we have the ability to expand that to other communities in addition to the 4 South LA communities that have traditionally been funded. We have funding now to do a crisis response pilot. This is not the DMH, the Department of Mental Health, and the ATI, Alternatives to Incarceration model of alternative crisis response in lieu of law enforcement. This is after an incident has occurred. How do we support community? How do we communicate with community? How do we show up and provide services and healing spaces? Healing centered and trauma-informed systems change, and we're starting this by working with our own county departments to really look at how we do institutional change within departments, especially those who work with children and families. And we just kicked off a pilot with Department of Parks and Rec. They have made the commitment to be trauma-informed, and so we're going to be doing some work with them. And really, ultimately is we must shift the narrative about violence, because we hear the stories and the news prints the stories, but we really believe that it is important to emphasize and share that violence is preventable and predictable. It is preventable and it is predictable, and there are things that we know we can do to stop violence. And so we are shifting. A core element of this office is to shift that narrative, to uplift the strengths of communities, to talk about the public health approach. And we're starting by a storytelling project, which is a book that we're pulling together that contains the stories of 100 individuals. Wrap it up. Okay, got it. So we're going to skip all these slides, because this is just the detail behind some of what I said. And wait, let me just go back. Trauma Prevention Initiative, and the team is here, is in the house. Kelly, Arthi, Yvette. Tremendous work. The team is much larger, but these are the strategies that are funded by TPI. And again, I just want to emphasize here, this work is local, place-based. It's community-driven, it's community-led, public safety, and it funds hospital-based violence intervention, street outreach and intervention, capacity building, training, and technical assistance. We want to pull up a peer-to-peer violence prevention learning academy, really exciting, and more to come on that. Community engagement is at the core, and community really identifies what strategies they want to prioritize in their communities based on the violence that they're seeing in their communities. So, okay, now we can speed it up. It has shown an impact. Stop, wait, 2 more slides. American Rescue Plan funding. This is the good news. I mean, and again, I'll say that with the caveat is it's one-time funding of $20 million American Rescue Plan dollars. We are so grateful for this passage of funds and these funds to this office, the bulk of which will go out the door to community-based violence organizations to fund these strategies: street outreach, intervention services, peer-to-peer training academy. Invest in youth. We need to invest in youth, at-promise youth, mentorship and leadership programs, crisis response and community healing. And guess what? Flexible funding, because it's really hard to do something if you don't have housing, if you don't have food, and we recognize that you need flexible funding for those emergency needs of people who cannot hear you if they are not eating or they don't have a place to live. So, launching in July, we're so excited about that. It is one-time funding. Again, we're building relationships, we're building momentum. Then it's going to stop. We have 18 months. So more to come about that, but more conversations there. But okay, and last slide. This is my favorite quote by Angela Davis, and I think it epitomizes, and I want Supervisor. You see it? You know it, and I love this photo. Security is not possible as long as the physical, mental, and spiritual health of our communities is ignored. Safety and security require education, housing, jobs, art, music, and recreation. This is the work that we're doing in partnership with you. We look forward, we invite us to your tables. Let us know how we can support your work. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was absolutely, okay. That was very, very powerful. Certainly appreciate the Office of Violence Prevention. It took me back to the day when, see, I grew up in Watts, so I had team posts. Somebody know what that means. And so we had places to go, and our young people don't have those kind of places now. So let's give it up one more time for the Office of Violence Prevention. Thank you very, very much. And these are kind of the programs that, one, at the state level, partnershiping with the county, that absolutely I think is significant and makes a difference. So as we quickly move on, we have the Brady United, Erica Rice, Program Manager, and also Glenn Upshaw with Oakland Coordination. Would you please come and let's give them a round of applause as they come.
Yeah, we're gonna try to move as quickly as possible.
And also the PowerPoint presentation, Eric Washington will send it to everyone. So everyone who's registered, you have all these PowerPoints, so you can have it as well.
All right, we're gonna try to move quickly. We know time is short, and I don't wanna get one of these, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. My name's Erica Rice. I'm Program Manager with Brady, our Combating Crime Guns Initiative. And I just wanna have Glenn introduce himself.
I'm Glenn Upshaw. I am now the Violence Interrupter Manager for Youth Alive and also the Initiative Coordinator for Brady now of Oakland.
Thanks. We're really excited to have Glenn. Before Glenn, I was running the Oakland program for a few years. I'm a social worker by training, primarily therapeutic work, and Glenn just brings a whole nother type of perspective to this work. So I just want to get started and talk a little bit about our background. So the Combating Crime Guns Initiative is really focused on what we call our supply side approach. So today we've heard a lot about the various types of firearms that exist. We have our traditional firearms that you buy at brick and mortars. We have ghost guns. We have people having conversations about culturally relevant programs, therapeutic services, poverty alleviation. What we're really looking at is how do we address what's happening in the gun industry. So that's how we approach this work, which is a complement to all of the work that so many of you do here on a daily basis. We want to look at how do we shift the burden of gun violence prevention from the folks who are experiencing it on an everyday basis to those who are profiting from the violence. So this data, if you'll notice way at the bottom, which you might not be able to see, comes from a report that was written in 2000. That's 22 years old. It's 22 years old, and it says that 5% of gun dealers are responsible for 90% of crime guns. 90% of the crime guns that you find on the streets are provided by just a few dealers. This data is 22 years old because that's the last time the federal government released this data to the public. Wow. There was an amendment several years ago, back in the early 2000s, called the TR Amendment that essentially prevents the federal government, I'm saying that really specifically, the federal government from being able to release the names of dealers and how many firearms they're responsible for selling and providing into the community. That matters because we have conversations all the time about what local governments can do. What can state governments do? What can local governments do to increase transparency? And it's always been the take of our extraordinary team of attorneys at Brady that local and state governments can and release some of this data, and some have. Massachusetts released a really great report. The city of Chicago is what we consider the gold standard, and they released a report in 2017 that named all of their firearm dealers, how many firearms they released into the community, specifically crime guns, the types of crimes they were associated with, and the type of firearm. And so we want to make that really clear because there is space here to step in where the federal government has stepped back. I don't know why I'm changing it on mine. Here's something that's also really important that we also learned from that report. 86% of dealers never have a single crime gun traced back to them. This is really important because when you go out into the community, you say, there's this many dealers, they're selling firearms. Not so fun statistic is that there are more FFLs, federally firearm licensed dealers in the US than there are Starbucks and McDonald's combined. So the number of dealers that exist in the US exceeds those two companies combined. So think about how often you see the Golden Arches or the Green Lady. Think of that number, and then on top of that, that's how many places you can buy a firearm from. And so one of the things that we often hear is, well, if you're in the business of selling firearms for long enough, a crime gun is going to be traced back to you. Data doesn't say that. Data says the vast majority of dealers are actually following the laws that we have in place, of which there are many. So we should be using our resources to address the small percentage of dealers who are engaging in negligent or irresponsible behavior. And that's the best bang for our buck. You can continue. So these are sort of our 3 pillars for our Crime Guns initiative, which is to educate, identify, and reform. So part of what I'm doing today is just educating. Here's what the data says. Here's what we know about where crime guns come from. We think this is really important information, and we think that most people don't realize how often we don't have access to really crucial data that will allow us to make good policy decisions. The next piece is identify. So now that we know that the federal government isn't going to step up currently, or hasn't been in the last 20 years, to share information about dealers engaged in negligent practices, how do we engage our local officials, our state officials, to step in and be those pillars in our community? How do we support them in identifying funds, identifying ways to create ordinances that allow us to have information to this data, so that we as community members can be thinking about where we purchase, what types of dealers we want in our communities, if any at all. Oakland has no brick and mortar gun stores. It's one of the things I say all the time when people talk about the level of gun violence in Oakland, is there is no gun stores in Oakland. There are none. And yet we're suffering from gun violence that's happening, that's flowing in from outside of our city limits. So how do we identify who those folks are and hold them accountable, or at the very least, incentivize them to change the behavior that's causing the violence that's happening in the Oakland community? And then finally, reform. And a lot of this is linked to a variety of different, very technical things that we engage in, some of which are enhanced inspection reports. So how do we look at different inspection reports that are provided by the ATF and have an understanding of where, which dealers are most likely to engage in this negligent behavior? And also things like code of conduct. So asking dealers to video record point of sale, asking them to train their staff so that they know what a straw purchase looks like. Really basic preventative things that we can be doing and providing to dealers so that they have the best practices and tools at their fingertips. Just really quickly, I wanted to mention that this is a new resource that we just released about 2 months ago. It's called our Gun Store Transparency Project. Brady received thousands of inspection reports from the ATF, which we received via a FOIA, so Freedom of Information Act. So our attorneys essentially went to the federal government, filed for a public records request, it's give us all this data about which dealers had inspection reports and had lots of violations. We put all that information together and put it on a publicly available map. So this is available to the public. You can look at the entire inspection reports, the type of violations that each dealer was engaged in, and some of them are pretty egregious. Everything from selling multiple firearms without reporting it, to selling to folks who have said openly, I have a criminal record and I'm a prohibited person, and that person is still being sold a firearm. So it's not just as simple as people are stealing guns, which does happen, but I think that's often how the narrative is framed, but it's also dealers at the point of sale choosing not to abide by some of the laws that we put in place to protect us. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it off to Glenn for a second. Oh, you can just tell her, oh yeah.
Okay, I'll make this real quick, I'll rush through this. So this is an important part of the work that I do in the field as a frontline worker, racial justice in action. So when we deal with things like in our community, we have such high crime rates, as everyone has spoken on already today. In the town, in Oakland, we've seen increase since the pandemic. There's been a lot going on with these crime guns that are causing a lot of pain in our community with the brown and black folks. That is really just, it's just something that we should have the same justice as everyone have throughout the whole nation. So that's one thing I wanted to mention on that. And then this shows that the people who benefits the most are Caucasians in these gun sales. They are the ones who are benefiting, reaping the benefit from all of this, when the black and brown are the ones who are the victims of these sales. So it's important to say this portion because as they steady profit off of this, it's still causing grief in our community. And so these are some of the things that we are working in conjunction with Harborby Neighborhood Project, which is in Milwaukee. And they have a community group that goes out in the community to find out from the community folks that are affected by these crime guns, and they talk to the community, people that are in the streets, and find out where they get the guns from, how much they pay for the guns, how easy is it to get the gun. So they're doing that research. And as well, it's research that I'm aware of as well in Oakland. We've seen since the pandemic, we've seen arrests with all these military guns, all these high power guns, and a lot of this has come from the PPE. They have a load of PPP cards and a load of military weapons all as one, and there's no way that they could not know where these things are coming from. So I definitely think that it shouldn't have to go to it's already been an extreme loss in our community, but it shouldn't have to be like the opioids. The opioids didn't get addressed until it hit the suburbs. So this is something that needs to be addressed here and now. And so we do also storytelling projects, and that's also with some of the folks at Youth Alive doing the prevention and intervention. And storytelling is kind of telling, the victims are telling about some of their grief that they've had through gun violence, maybe lost a loved one, or these are stories that are told that you won't see on national media. So you get a real feel of what these victims are going through. And in the inner city, it's almost no black or brown who hasn't been affected by gun violence or lost a loved one, but someone knows someone in that circle. So it's a sad vision. And so some of our collaboration building is through Oakland Violence Prevention Coordination, Cal Vic, Community Coalition of Quality Policy, and Wisconsin Gun Safety. And so the work, ways that folks can be involved, as Erica said, you guys can go on the website. It's enough work for everyone to be a part of, to want a better community. And as they say, it takes a village. So I found myself finding more ways to enhance the work that I do. So I think that's where, yeah.
Fortunately, the folks before us did a lot of the heavy lifting on ghost guns and giving us some stats about what's happening here in LA. Not that anybody needed to be reminded of the amount of violence that's happening. But I did want to note a couple of things. In addition to supporting Assemblymember Gibson's bill, we're also supporting SB 1384, which is really focused on dealer accountability. And two primary pieces of that bill is around
increased training for dealers to ensure that their staff know how to spot a straw purchase, know how to perform a safe sale, know how to fill out all the correct paperwork, understand how to do that to the best of their ability and within the confines of the law, but also video recording points of sale. So I go to Target often. Record it every single time I walk into Target. I am not sure why people aren't recorded during the sale of a firearm. So one of the things that we really want to increase is having that kind of security measure, which is we want to understand if that gun were to be found at the scene of a crime later on, that we have the proper information to ensure that we saw that every part of the law was followed, and then hold the appropriate people accountable if they weren't. So I think those are two things I wanted to mention before we wrapped up. Thank you.
Again, Oakland's in the house. Let's give it up for them one more time. If we can hit the lights real quick, we want to move to our next presenter before we actually do our breakouts. And again, I think these breakouts are going to be absolutely powerful. And let me just really say this, that I need everyone to be their authentic self. We're family, and I just need, because of your experience, your wisdom, because the shoes you've walked in, and we need to come out with a plan that absolutely makes sense, that absolutely try to address some of the issues that we're talking about here today. So it's really important when we get into these breakout sessions and just be real. I know that here in Los Angeles, we're celebrating, I think it's 50 or 30 years in terms of the gang truce that exists, and also 30 years. Thank you very much. 30 years, and also just entered into 30 years of the Rodney King beating as well. And so with that being said, I want to move quickly to the Los Angeles Gang Reduction and Youth Development Program. Would you guys please come up and let's give them a round of applause. Carlos and also Paula, Program Manager.
So we promise we'll be quick, or else my buddy Eric's going to have a heart attack. Give a round of applause to Eric. Thank you for inviting us, putting us together. So we're going to speed through it. So Paula and I are humbled enough and lucky enough to be able to present on behalf of GRID, but we truly stand on the shoulders of giants, many of whom are with us today. And so even though it's us two, we're really representing hundreds of community intervention workers and case managers that are doing all the work. So the GRID office was established out of the mayor's office in 2007 as an initiative to really foster youth development and to reduce the influence of gangs, street gangs, in the lives of our youth and in our communities. And so we use a neighborhood-based approach, really focusing on the areas most impacted by gang violence. And we call these GRID zones, and we'll talk a little bit about what those look like in a bit. And ultimately, our vision is to have communities that are healthy, that are safe, and that are thriving. And so our mission, I think you skipped one. So our mission is really improving the overall well-being of families and our communities by really engaging in this four-pronged approach. So as GRID, we provide gang prevention services, gang intervention services, incident response, which is our violence interruption, but also community engagement. So Paula's going to talk a little bit about what community engagement looks like. I think I skipped a page. You go back? No, sorry, 4. There. So these are the GRID zones that we talked about. So even though we're with the city of Los Angeles, GRID doesn't cover every single piece of the city of Los Angeles. As you can imagine, some areas probably don't need it, and some areas need it more than others. So we do cover GRID zones from the San Fernando Valley all the way to the... Okay. Now we'll talk about community engagement.
Good morning, everyone. Paula Fanador, Program Manager. So we're going to talk about community engagement. And before, if you can move to the next slide, I'm going to talk about the big program that we have that brings everyone together from our community to the Summer Night Lights program. Before I start talking about Summer Night Lights, I want to highlight another program that we have on a yearly basis in partnership with law enforcement, which is the Gun Buyback Program. For the past 5 years, we have recovered approximately 1,600 guns, which it helps our communities. We usually do it in 2 locations. For the first time this year, we did it in 4 locations. So it's a good way for us to, is anonymously, people come, they drop their guns, no questions asked. So that's one of a program that we do with law enforcement. And going back to the Summer Night Lights program, because we know that violence increases during the summer, we bring together our different partners from prevention, intervention, and law enforcement to run these programs in 32 areas in the city of Los Angeles. For the first time this year, we're actually going to be increasing 11 more sites. So we're going to be in 43 parks around the city of LA, where different youth from our community, the youth from the communities that we have these events at, they're going to be hired. They're going to be running programming. And one of the benefits for the community members is they get free food. They're able to access resources. A lot of organizations from the areas come. They provide services to the youth and the families that go to the park. There's also free sports in collaboration with Recreation and Parks. And it's a good way to bring all of the community together into one location to decrease violence and increase those pro-social activities in our communities. Next, I'm going to be talking about gang prevention. So gang prevention services is for youth between the ages of 10 to 15 years old that live on those grid zones that Carlos was mentioning that have a high risk of joining gangs. So when we have a referral from a youth, the youth completes an assessment, and the assessment looks at 9 risk factors that could lead a youth to joining a gang. So some of those risk factors are antisocial tendencies, critical life events, if they have lack of supervision from the parents. So once the youth they qualify for the program based on those risk factors, there's going to be mentorship provided if there's anything, substance abuse, mental health. There's going to be a lot of youth development activities and programs that are going to be working with the youth along with the parent. And there's also the genogram. We'll look at the genogram and the family history to build our relationship, to strengthen the relationship with the family, because we eventually want to decrease those risk factors so the youth doesn't have that connection with gangs and they don't join a gang.
You can go to the next one. So looking at our gang intervention services, so taking a step back to each grid zone, we contract a gang intervention and gang prevention local nonprofit to run these services. So, you know, we talked about community intervention workers and case managers. They really are the ones that are implementing our model of services. So with intervention, we're working with youth and emerging adults 14 to 25 who have self-identified or self-disclosed that they're impacted by the gang in some way, shape, or form. And so we're looking for individuals that fall within that age range, are from the communities, are disclosing that they're gang impacted, but at the end of the day, the grid office doesn't dictate who receives services and who doesn't. We leave that in the hands of the service providers. They're the experts, they're the ones on the ground, they're the ones that know these communities better than anybody else, and so they are also implementing the model, but they're also kind of bringing folks in and deciding who should get services and who doesn't. And I really shouldn't say who doesn't, because at the end of the day, our service providers find ways to connect people, whether it's within or other services that they provide in-house. But intervention case, we're really looking at family case management. So it's not just working with the individual, it's working with the whole family as a unit. And we're really looking at the areas in which this individual is embedded within the gang lifestyle. And our goal through services is to kind of connect them to pro-social activities. And so a lot of our service providers are linking people to jobs, educational opportunities. We've had religion, we've had, even within the GRID program, we've had clients become staff, right? So it's connecting these individuals to pro-social activities to reduce their embeddedness within the gang. And so they do this over the course of 6 months to a year, sometimes year and a half. And the last prong of our comprehensive strategy is our violence interruption. So this is the one that probably gets the most attention and the most visible part of what we do. So we provide 24/7 incident response in the city of Los Angeles. And when I say we, I mean that includes the grid office. So we operate under a triangle protocol with LAPD to make sure that information is being filtered and disseminated amongst all the partners. So the way this works is when there's a gang-related shooting, LAPD notifies the grid office, we filter that information, communicate and deploy our intervention workers, and they go out and work that incident, right? And so it's very important that we kind of talk about what gets discussed, what doesn't get discussed, and I want to be careful what I say before Twin yells at me. I see him looking at me. Our job is not to find out who did the shooting, right? And we're not asking for that. Our mission, and which is aligned with everybody, is we want to reduce and minimize the chance for the next shooting, however that may be, right? And the only way we do that is because of our intervention workers. They have those relationships with those folks. They've built that trust. They come from those communities. So they're able to have those conversations in ways law enforcement and, frankly, government cannot have, right? And so I cannot stress enough how important their LTO is, their license to operate, and how much we as an office are mindful of that and respect that, right? And so really want to thank for their partnership, for allowing us to present on their behalf. But one of the things that I want to say is, I know we're speeding through this, but everything we shared today, in addition to many more resources, is all available on our website, lagrid.org. And that's not just a plug. That's really a portal for you all to use to read some of our reports. So one of our latest reports, really digging deep into the effectiveness of intervention, specifically incident response, is, through all the efforts of our community intervention workers, retaliatory shootings were decreased by 41%. That's huge, right? And I think one of the things is, how do you quantify a saved life, right? How do you prove that? What's the data set for that, right? And we don't always have that. But we do document all of their efforts, and we are able to know, when some gangs are active and when they're not. And so it's a full-time job. I say that, not just 40 hours. It's, it's really at all times of the day. And I can't thank folks enough. And I'll end with this because I see right in front of me. The city doesn't work with the county. The city doesn't work with the county. The city needs to work with the county. I look forward to being a thought partner with you and expanding this, not just for a city and a county issue, but really making it a regional approach. And so I thank you for being here today. I look forward to being a thought partner. Thank you all.
How's everyone doing today? Got some great information from all districts, all counties, city. Okay, so at this moment, this is where the real work starts. The presentations were great. Our county and city counterparts, our elected officials, our public servants, that was awesome. But the real work starts now in these breakout rooms. I'm gonna have Mr. Kenny, if you can have everyone please come in. That's in the hallway, please come in. Because we're about to break out right now into our breakout rooms. All of you should have a number that was given to you when you first registered in for the conference, right? And so right now, I'm about to announce the breakout rooms. You all have the agenda. Now, the agenda provides you with which breakout room that number corresponds to you with. So, for example, if you have breakout room number 1, then you will be in breakout room 1, and the chaperone, along with the facilitator, will escort you to that breakout room. It's a short walk upstairs. All breakout rooms are near each other, so the rotation should be very swift and efficient. And so just give me one moment while we have everyone come back in, please. Yeah, I already told somebody that couldn't come in. can you get it, Sal? Excel? Excel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So on your agenda, which you all have in your tote bags, is the agenda on where the breakout rooms will start. We're a little behind at the moment, so don't worry about that. But your breakout room will be exiting at the exact time that's on your agenda. So breakout room, the first session of the breakout rooms will be a little shorter. So if you see here, you got breakout room number 1. So can I have everyone who has the number 1 please stand? Breakout room 1. I just need you to stand, don't move. Okay, so can I get the first chaperone for breakout room 1? If you can follow Mr. Benny here, he's breakout room 1. Benny, raise your hand, and he's gonna lead you out the door. Breakout room 1, please. Thank you. As quickly as possible, please. Okay. Breakout room 2, if you're number 2, can you please stand? Breakout room 2? May I please have the chaperone for breakout room 2, please? Ms. Don't say if you can lead them out the door this way. Ms. Don't say as your breakout room partner.
So, like you said, I will be your facilitator for Group 5. I'll just give you a quick background on me. I do work in the grid office. I am an RPC that represents the 77th 1, 2, 3 grid zones. I have experienced the last 8 years in gang intervention and prevention. Started as a case manager in prevention in the Newton area. Started doing case management for intervention in the Watts area, and became a supervisor in the same area as well. So the intervention piece was it was like a baby to me because of the area that I grew up in. I came from, Chicago at a very young age, moved to the Ramona Gardens, only black family in the Ramona Gardens. From there, mom moved us to Watts, east side of LA. So, we experienced a lot of gang activity, a lot of violence. My best friend was walking home on 48 and Western, maybe a couple houses from his house. He had his head blown away. They never found the killer. We knew it was gang violence. 6 months later, my other best friend, we all played basketball together. He was walking home from Crenshaw High School. He was 2 minutes away from his home. He was shot 7 times, killed. This is in 1997. So all this happened when I was 14 years old. I get home, maybe about a year later, I'm walking down Slauson and Broadway. There's a train track that I don't even know if it's operational anymore, but at the time it was. I stopped at the train track. I was walking to my friend's house. Car pulled up. 3 guys got out, all pulled guns out on me. They wanted my jacket, they wanted my wallet, they wanted my CD player until they realized what CD I had in there, and they gave it back to me. But I got home and I realized I could have been on the other side of that. I stayed away from gangs. I played basketball. I did a lot of walking. My sister's boyfriend at the time, he was from Palmer Block in Compton. He brought me a gun. He said, "This is what we call a burner. So if you ever need it, keep it, take it with you, protect yourself." So at the time, I took it. It never left my house, but I always knew I had it. I always knew that I didn't want to use it. So when my mom found out that I got robbed at gunpoint, she was mad at me, only because she didn't really understand the dynamics of gang violence and gun violence. So maybe about a week later, she came in my room and she said, "What are you going to do about it?" Knowing I had a gun, it didn't hit me till probably like the next day. God bless her soul. She wasn't asking me what I'm going to do about it as far as like retaliation going, what are you going to do to make a change? She always kept me away from the streets for a reason. So that's what got me into the work that I'm doing today. I started in, 2008. So like I said, I could have been on the other side of that coin. I wouldn't, I either could have got killed or I could have got pulled over with a gun. You never know, but God blessed me and gave me the light to continue to do the work. And like I said, this is just the beginning for me, beginning for a lot of us. And we have to find a way to stop and prevent the gun violence, because every day it's taking away our babies. Like I said, I'm an RPC. I get a lot of notifications about gun violence, shootings. I sleep with my phone underneath my pillow because you never know. I get calls at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 in the evening, 3 in the morning. So we have to stop what we're doing to contact, like you said, the giants, the people that we don't see that's doing the legwork, the interventionists. I did a lot of work with Twin and Barbara Jett back there, and those who are the people who are stopping the retaliations. They say we stop, 44% of retaliations, but there's a big percentage that doesn't get documented. There's a big percentage that doesn't show them preventing a fight that could result in a murder or shooting or whatever. So there's a lot of work that goes behind it. But with a lot of work, there comes a lot of stress. There comes a lot of trauma. You know, you can never be compensated to, you know, there's no amount of money that you can give these interventionists to compensate to what they do. It'll never equal. It will, you know, so you know they're doing it because of the love that they have for the community, the love that they have for each other, and the love that they have for the youth. They want the community to be better. They want the community to be safer. You know, so like I said, there's not many gun shops in Los Angeles. Where are these kids getting these guns? Where are these kids getting these assault rifles, automatic weapons? And it's continuing to get in the hands of these kids that's getting younger and younger and younger. I had a kid maybe about 4 months ago in Watts, got a hold to an assault rifle and went to Markham Middle School and just started shooting. We find out this kid might have been 10 or 11 years old, just got put in the game. So, you know, take this gun, do what you gotta do. So what I'm saying is, you know, we have two questions. What's working out here in these streets and what is not working? So this is the portion where, you know, we have the Q&A for us to listen and have a healthy conversation on what needs to be done to prevent gun violence. You know, because like the presenters were saying earlier, it can be any of us. It can be our kids, it can be our kids' friends. We don't know. So what can we do to make it better from your perspective? Go ahead.
Who is the we? Why don't you take your name? Hi, my name is Paul Dozier. I'm a member of 100 Black Men. I'm a small business owner in the city of Long Beach. I'm also involved with a couple of nonprofits. But when you say what can we do, who is the we that's doing it?
So when I say we, I always start off with the frontliners, the people that's been doing the work and will continue to work when we're long gone. Those are normally the interventionists, but they do represent nonprofits as well. So how can these interventionists and these nonprofits help prevent gun violence? And what can we do to not just help gun violence, but to help them cope with it?
Got it. So if I can, and I'll keep it short, I'm from Chicago, raised in Robert Taylor Homes, Black Gangster Disciple, right around the breakdown of the Black Panther movement. When Black Gangster Disciples were trying to buy property and that sort of thing, gang violence came in when they brought in guns and drugs and that sort of thing. Everyone knows the story. What helped me get out of it was my cousins kept me from it. So I was the only child to the baby of the family. My mother, who ran with the Johnson brothers and Ebony magazine, that sort of thing. So they called me, the little spoiled kid. What kept me out of it was I started working at 14 years old. So someone mentored me. So I appreciate all those things, but it really boils down to people taking an interest in me. That's what got me out of that situation. I've had people fall from building in front of me, laying on coal. This other guy had a gun pointed at me as a kid, and I said, "You better kill me." So I was right in the middle of that ecosystem, right? But what saved me was people taking a direct interest in me, one person at a time. That's what I believe democracy is take an interest in one person at a time and follow through.
Yeah, that's powerful. I had a mentor that took me under his wing, Larry Gray. He was the captain of the airport police at the time. He's retired since, but he kept me busy.
That's right.
If I wasn't playing basketball, I was working.
That's right.
And if I wasn't working, I was at his house.
That's right. Paper route, job at McDonald's, a
Right.
job at the place right across from there, living in YMCA. Mother suffering from manic depression, schizophrenia. And when I graduated from high school, the owner of McDonald's, so it wasn't like,
Right.
it was just the owner of McDonald's, one of the owners, got me a 1984 Cadillac sedan to build. And I slept in that car all night long, because legally I couldn't drive it, but he didn't care. He wanted to just sow a seed into my life. And that's what kept me out.
Definitely. So the mentors play a big part in a young kid's life, a young man's and a young woman's life. So we have to find more mentors and be involved, because if we don't be involved, the next best thing is the people on the block. That's who they see every day. That's who they see with the money, with the cars. How can I get this? How did you get this? How can I be down? So the mentors, we have to grab them and treat them like one of our own, like you would treat your own kid. You know, we have to change their lives and their perspective on reality and the real world and the consequences of their actions.
So I kind of want to piggyback on what he said. I too, as a young child, was a part of a vision program which I currently work for. As a young child, it's a drug prevention program, and I believe we've been in the Compton community for about 35, 40 years. And that too, the employees of that program kept me busy. So I do agree that we do need a lot more youth programs reaching out to the youth at a young age.
Definitely. So like you said, just staying busy, but that's why we're here. The collaborative networks is to exchange information, exchange cards, you know, to funnel each client, you know, through the right system. We have to. Like you said, if they have plenty of time on their hands, like, you know, back in the day, you know, all we wanted was, you know, video games and we might go play, you know, some hoops or football, and, you know, that's how, but these kids are not doing that anymore. This pandemic is not helping at all. So they need money, they need fast money, they want fast money, and they're willing to do anything to do it, not knowing that there's job opportunities out here for you to do the right thing.
Hi, my name is and I'm currently a USC master's student in public health. That's my background, but I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I'm a Black woman. I lost my mother when I was 15 years old to breast cancer and schizophrenia, and I lost my father when I was 10 to a police-involved shooting. So navigating LA as an orphan has been really interesting for me. And hearing the mentorship was key, but I think the biggest thing for me was knowing the value that I had. Because I literally remember the day my mom died. I sat on the steps of my grandmother's, and I said, I have a choice. I could be promiscuous, I can rebel, I can be mad, I can grieve, or I can live my best life. And with that said, I chose education. And even with that, it was hard because like I was short. I wanted to choose basketball. So basketball, like I talked to a young man, 25, North Carolina, not in gangs, but struggling right now, right? That's a personal. But he told me there's 5 things that he could have done, 4 things out of North Carolina. Go to sports, go to gangs, murder, or education. He didn't get to choose education. So there was a block. In LA, I got to choose education as like we have to distinguish between being a female, being a man. So, and also me being a beautiful, light-skinned female, I can maneuver and be cute in places and articulate myself where young males can't. And I wasn't a gang member, I would have been a gang girlfriend, or I wasn't about to slang no dope. But to be real with you guys, like as a young kid who grew up through the system where it is now, and a lot of things that how they maneuver, like kids can't wear colors. And that's sad. Like a black male has to choose to wear all black because it's the safest color to wear. Can't wear white because you can't wash clothes. So what you gonna do? So I kind of have an out-of-the-box idea of a shuttle system because these kids also, their parents are working or they don't have mother's death and the trauma didn't hit me till she wasn't at high school graduation. So I'm a high performer, but out of spite. So I did do all the things, I did all the activities, I got a mentor, I did all the things. I'm successful on paper. I'm a 4.0 student at USC, but I still deal with that trauma.
Yeah.
So with the gun violence, with the gangs, it's trauma, it's camaraderie, it's brotherhood. Like, if we don't get to that root, then you're not going to fix it.
Definitely, definitely.
First of all, thank you all for being here. My name is Giuliano Hakim, first generation Angelino. Mi sangre, I'm Afro-Cuban, Cuban descent. Spent a lot of time in Compton. Grew up with Cypress Hill. Those were my buddies growing up. We were street dancers in '84. Got to be with my people, but I still didn't know who I was because I was around brown and black and was family until I knew who I was. I appreciated the word values. Everything in our world has values, but a lot of times we don't quantify and qualify the value system. And valuing who we are, what we are, como somos, como debemos ser, however we may be, it's a critical component. And with that, being an enumerator, past professor at UCLA, mental health worker, I have a nonprofit on mental health, but I deal with tribal mannerisms from John Maxwell, indigenous, flavorful existence. Identifying the value of who we are and existing with a culture of complexity, because we are complex creatures, and we live in the most densest population of the United States here in the Southeast LA. A lot of times we don't have the ability to elaborate on the importance of values. Values can be a law, it can be a legislative bill, it can be a business. So my interest is in amplifying the value that we are as a unity. I hear mentorship, but that stems from the root cause of what do we value in life. Defining the value of self-worth through strategic structure, systems, culture, existence is critical. And that, I'm a religious person, having the faith of what we're doing too. We don't speak what we feel a lot of times, and that's a critical component of language, linguistics, cultural mannerisms. I'm probably going all over the board being a professor, mental health guy. But people need to know who we are, what we are, and why we are. And they don't need to understand, but they need to respect the value system. Here's the freaking badass value system right here, guys. Yeah. And the dilemma is people frame us and label us. You know, I grew up in Compton. I used to break dance at the library at the corner of Compton, and I forget what I was doing. People need to know who we are, and we know who we are, but we need to tell that story with our hand up, standing together. On top of the value system, we need to continually meet and hold each other accountable to what we define as our values. You know, it's not a policy. It can be, values can be a law, values can be a love, values can be a contract. Values is the real word, in my opinion, of social constructs, population management, regions, spas. Yeah, a culture and value system is what it is all about, but including love, I know I'm probably going on, guys, but I want to go deep, and a lot of times we don't freaking go deep because we have to define on what we've got to tell the story. And yeah, this is beautiful here. We're praying without even praying right here. I'm going to start crying. But we need to stay committed to what we're doing, guys, and hold each other accountable to what they're doing. You know, we don't have to be a statistical data. We don't have to be a norm. We need to be an outlier. We say, what the hell are you doing, Giuliano? What the hell are you doing here in Dominguez Hill? We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. You don't need to ask us. Come join us. Let's have a value system. Let's define that. And it's ganas, it's heart. It's not thinking, it's acting. And we're doing it all here. And I'm hoping I'm pulling some strings that are making you vibrate. And you are. But how do we create an orchestra of this vibe? There's a lot of freaking flavors. We have our elders, we have our ancestral ways, we have our tapes that we hear in our head that really I'm mumbling, I'm being a professor, mental health worker. But, how do we stay together doing this? And that's what I want to challenge all of us. You know, tú tienes tu música. We have, an orchestra has all kinds of instruments. How do we create these instruments of a bandwidth, an echo center, you know, politics, academics, underserved, equal justice? Who gives a shit what the hell it is? We gotta exist. And, you know, I don't want to be PC. I don't want to be politically correct. You know, I want to be real.
No,
it's real. It's real. And it's all about, I call it the 3 BS's. Better self, basic stuff, and the bullshit that we don't talk about. And the bullshit is what needs to be extracted to be our better self and address basic stuff. But, you know, I love all you crazy folks here, but how do we continue to love? How do we share it? We don't need to define, we just gotta bring something to the table. So values, and not just values, how do we define the values of what we're struggling to achieve? And a couple of jig drums are pretty badass too to bring the circles in. I'm sorry. But being real, and tribal mannerism, anthropological ways, you know, sustainable, unreported demographics of populations that are existing sustainably, that are off the grid, but they're loving each other. They have a value system. I'm sorry, going on.
It's all right. It's all right.
I just want to say something, because I think that this is why we're here. We're having a conversation as families. I think that people need to be their authentic self. We talked about values. We talked about mentorship, right? And I know Twin and this young lady has a question. I just think, again, we want to extract these conversations out so we can make sure that she captured this, right? Because I grew up, we had team posts, and I had big homies who was my mentors who made sure that I didn't go crazy and, you know, join the Bloods and the whole 9 yards. But we had people we held accountable, right? You know, Twin right now, you know, all the work that he does in his communities and the whole 9 yards is reaching out to the little homies who just want to go buck wild, right? But it's because of him and his statue, right, that keeps him, you know, at bay and things of that nature. So what you're saying is authentic, and it's what we need to have a conversation about. So,
Definitely. So the two key things were values and trauma that we have to, you know, focus on.
And accountability, sticking to it. If we don't do reps, if we only do 2 reps, it's done. We got to continue to do reps and push harder and keep on top of it and keep us accountable. You say you're going to do that? Dude, you said you're going to do it. What's up, man? Come on. We're here to help you carry the cross.
Definitely. So we have another question. Well, it might be more inside of Twin. Let me, Twin, I never gangbanged. I stayed out of gangs, and you know, because I wanted to get into this work. But when people ask about gang intervention, I always tell people that Twin is my OG. I watched him for 7 years, just, you know, being a sponge of what he was doing in the community, you know. So go ahead, Twin.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Lawrence. I'm also known as Twin. I'm the co-founder for Advocates for Peace in the Community. Right now, I'm the regional coordinator for Trauma Prevention Initiative under Solidarity and Action in the rest of my community. And both of them spoke on the identity. And I think that's what plagued black men is don't know who the hell we are. You know, it's culturally nothing connected to us. We don't have our own language. Everybody have their own language except the black man. You know, so we got to pick up things here and there, and I think it's something that's spiritually and culturally ancestral that we missing. Until we get back to our identity of who we are as a black man, we gonna be all over the place. Because if we, you know, for most men, we find ourselves we go to prison. We find out we were the chosen. And we understand why we're the most hated. And then when we break all that down, it comes about who am I? Everybody can trace their ancestral history back to the beginning, except us. And so until we start talking truth and to who we are, where we come from, we're gonna keep chasing things until somebody tells us who we are, where we belong. So us identifying who we are, my place on this earth, my existence, we won't look at each other as hate, well, I want to hurt you again. And so when we having these, and it all comes from trauma, stemming from trauma. We've been traumatized, we've been carrying this on for generations, and so when we, right now where I'm at now, we know trauma and mental health is a big place, and I think trauma is a good word for mental health now. And I think that when we, and you know, we having these agencies and they give us these trainings, mandatory trainings, but the trainings is somebody that don't look like me. It's somebody that don't come from where I come from. And so if you're not talking about ancestral trauma, you're missing us. We like, this don't apply to me. This only applies to the European. But where you come from, when you got traumatized, our trauma comes from something much deeper. And if you're up there talking to us and not talking about that, you're missing the whole point of talking to our soul. And if you can't get there, you're missing the whole point. And I think it's at a time where our identity is finally being recognized. And so while we got the audience right here, we got to deep down and to find out who we are, ancestral, Until we do that, we're going to look at each other with hate. Because we don't understand each other. We don't know who our place here. And so this is what I find out, this is the community from the gang culture, because we find out in the prisons, that who we are. And why do it have to happen? So I think at an early age, we need to have these spaces where we can talk about who we are. And if we find that we got too many definitions of what a black man is. What every other culture of a man, if this is what it is, we all over the damn place with us. And why is it that? It shouldn't be that way. We many facets. You know what I mean? We light skinned, we dark skinned, we big, we skinny, we fat. Some of us we play sports, some of us can't, some of us can cook. Some of us is educated, some of us not. Until we start let somebody define that, we only can play basketball, we limit ourselves. We much more than that. As you can see, my brother like Gibson, how he mentioned them. You know what I mean? We have Barack Obama, we had somebody just get voted into the Supreme Court of female. We gotta honor the things and say this is who we are. And as a black man, these healing circles that we have spaces like this where we can talk about it. And healing spaces, healing centers in our community, I think is replacing our churches now. Because I think our churches they did their part for what it was meant for. And I think once you get, when you keep doing the same thing over and over the same way, you standing still and everything is moving past you. And I think that's where the disconnect comes from our youth, where they look at our churches now. The church, ain't nothing wrong with the church. I think it's just what's being said up there is not touching them. Instead of taking the time out and asking the congregation what it is you need, what it is you looking for. Right. And so until we start getting to that point, finding out who your identity is, our true identity, and redefining what the black man is, I think we're going to keep, repeating this cycle. Yeah. So this will come down for me.
Thank you. Young lady in the back.
I want to say that our communities right now, what can we do right now?
Right.
It's in critical condition all across the board with our young people. I was raised in a family of 13. Nobody went to jail. Nobody got on drugs with me. But in being in a family raised in Compton, my mother had a foundation, and that was the church. And we were all raised in church. But our physical foundation was getting what we needed from church. And that's a missing component in our community, where I believe that we need boots on the ground. We need to be present in our community. Because without the community taking back our city, being a part of the community, the family, the church, everything plays a part of building up a community. And I believe we need boots on the ground, and we need the church for prayer. And we need to work together and go out in our parks. That's where the gang members hang out, in the parks. We can do that right now. But we have to put it in motion, going out there to save our community. And it can be done. You can sit behind the church pew or stay inside behind your desk. But if you don't get out in the streets where the war is, where people are, we're most effective when we show up.
Right. Right. Thank you. Go right here. You're gonna work our way back. Okay. You go ahead.
Thank you. Robert Chavez with the South Bay Workforce Investment Board, Workforce Development Program. I grew up in East LA, and I got out of gang issues because all my relatives were in. System of prison, father, uncles, grandfather, all the way through. So I saw something different. But what kind of saved me was after school programming with LAUSD. dramatically throughout the years. Love what you guys are doing with LA Grid. Those programs need to systemically be funded because what they do is they just provide the safe haven. Now that's the bare minimum, which is the foundational aspect of it. In South Bay, my job, the first thing I did when I got there 22 years ago was we got government grants to assist individuals in getting out of gangs through employment opportunities. And we use facilities and agencies like yourselves to do the real work to get those foundational pieces set up so when they come to us, they're kind of ready, or at least the light bulb's on. Now, that's great when they're already 18, 19, 20, but it's kind of too late at that point. Meaning too late to affect the trauma that's already been outlined. So at a younger age, we need after-school programming, teen centers, to not just provide sports. Luckily for me, I love sports and it got me out of there, but not everyone's with sports. And again, you need music, you need everything from learning how to play ping pong to cooking to getting programming, exposure programs so that young people understand that when you work at a hospital, it's not just a doctor or a nurse, it's all the other types of activities. So when they are 18, or actually, 14, 15, 16, they're ready to do summer youth programming with real internships. That was the second part that saved me. Sports was great for me, but once I got the opportunity as a summer youth worker because my family was systematically on CalWorks and love the program because obviously it provides that foundation to get people off that cycle. But what's more important is the opportunity gives young people to get that first job. And when I first started the programs, I mean, I ran a program that had 12 to 1,500 slots just in the South Bay area. The South Bay area, for those of you probably don't know, Inglewood all the way down to Lomita and everything in between, including Carson. And very diverse area. So one day I'll be at the beach cities, the next day I'll be in Inglewood. And we know what's going on in Inglewood right now. So again, with all of this, it's exposure opportunities for young people, mentoring. These employers don't understand, but they're actually mentoring these people, and it's okay that they don't. It's as long as they're giving these opportunities. But when they keep getting cut, and these opportunities there don't impact those young people, that's what it is. And again, the last thing I'll say about that is most folks, again, from more diverse communities, they have built-in mentorships already. Mom and dad take them to work.
Yeah.
Continue to do that for those in the room, because that's important. But our young people who don't have those opportunities look for programs like ours. So I tell my case managers every day of the week, you're the uncle, you're the aunt that is helping these young people get that internship, and it's paid. And that's the other thing. We gotta do better with that. That's it can't be just unpaid.
Right.
It has to be paid.
Definitely.
So you build these foundations when they're ready for employment. That's when we really take over. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, I appreciate it,
Did you say paid?
Paid.
Paid opportunities?
These put teen centers up there, or even after-school programs.
Yeah, I did.
That's where a lot of these things get started.
And I just want to piggyback on what you said. Father Boyle, homeboy, said, give a man or woman a job to stop a bullet, right? And I was talking to someone earlier today, this morning, about value, self-worth, right? If you get a brother or sister who just get out of prison, right, they feel devalued. But if you give them a job, or the brothers and sisters right now who is in gangs or whatever, right, who don't have any gainful employment, who are just hanging out, is the solution, or one of the solutions, is giving them or helping them get a job? I'm a firm believer that if you do that, then you have just changed that person's entire life. Because now they can feel good about going, not to a check cashing place, but going to a bank, depositing money, paying for rent, right? It just uplifts a man's ability to be a man, especially if you got kids. It's nothing worse than, I testified in one of my bills of last week, it's nothing worse than a father who can't provide for their children, who don't have a job, right? So I'm a firm believer, no one's been able to convince me that a job is, does not make a significant impact in terms of these brothers and sisters out there in the streets.
Right, right. There you go.
In the back, please.
Which one? Right here?
Just to continue on what you were saying, so for children, they spend a greater time in school.
Mhm.
They spend more time in school than they do with their parents, especially for children who have to go to after-school programs.
Yeah.
So they're there from maybe 8 in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening. So I think that we need to be able to fund schools so that they are providing opportunities for children to get out of the environment that they see every day. So I think a lot of the things is most children in our community, and I'm born and raised in the city of Compton, is they've never been out of their city. They've never seen the beach.
Yeah.
They've never seen the mountains. So for 5th grade graduation, 8th grade graduation, senior graduation, if the school would be able to pay for students to get on an airplane, go to another state, even go up north, because how it doesn't matter, you get it off, right? Because they can see that there's more out there than what is just in their immediate environment. And that allows them to know that, yes, I have more opportunities than what is just in front of my face. A lot of times, we don't know that we can make $100,000 a year because we've never seen or met anyone who has done it. But if you take them out of an environment where that is the norm and place them somewhere where they can see it in action, then they can believe that it can be done.
Right.
So I think that we need to put funding into public education that allows for students to be able to see more than just their immediate environment.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have an organization, it's called Phenomenal Angels of the Community, and we were mentoring girls 7 to 17. You are absolutely right across the board. Some people have never, we took them to Malibu Beach to do horse riding. They didn't know beach water was blue. They had never been, we've taken them to the opera, which I thought they would hate, but they absolutely loved. We took them fencing, we tried to do everything out of the box. And 75% of my girls have graduated and gone on out. And showing them something different, because if they see bullshit all day, they think bullshit is the norm. But when they see that there's another way to do it, it always opens eyes.
Yeah.
So yes.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is William Jackson, I work for Chapter 2 in South City. Just to piggyback on what everybody was saying, I was one of those young guys that had to learn a new norm. This April 8th, I've been home 8 years and about five months now. So I was one of the guys that was in the institution, like Mr. Twin was saying, trying to figure out what it is that I can do to make myself better for when I come home. During my last joke, I missed my first child being born. So it was like anything that you feel that's the worst that you've been through in your life, that was me. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, I don't get tore these towns up, Twin on me, you know what I mean? You know, and it was like, how can I better myself? You know, I have a son right now, a stepson that's in a re-entry program, fresh out of 10. On his light, his light, we must be a light. We gotta make our light shine that much more brighter than what it is now. You know what I mean? In order for me to get my little homie's attention, I gotta show him that it's all right to turn your life around and move forward, despite of what these other people say.
Right.
But no matter what you do in life, you're gonna have the naysayers and you're gonna have those that's gonna be there to congratulate. You know what I mean? Push you to drive and move forward. And that's all I try to be. You know what I mean? I keep it real, I keep it 100. I'm not the most professional intervention you ever gonna meet. You know what I mean? But I speak from my heart. Because I done been there and I done done it. I done been on my deathbed. I done sat across the table from the guy who shot me to put me on my deathbed. And if I can do that, then, I mean, you know, what more can we do? You know what I mean? Like you say, boots on the ground, we gotta continue our boots on the ground. We gotta stumble, we gotta fall, we gotta roll, we gotta flip, we gotta get these guys' attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't learn from you.
Right.
You wasn't a gang member.
Right.
Not saying I can't, but
Right.
if I was in that world, I can't learn from you because
Right.
you didn't live the life that I lived. You see what I'm saying? So it's predestined that we all are here to learn from each other.
Right.
I don't care where you grew up, what nationality, because we all have the same problems. Period. Some is worse than others and some is not. You know what I mean? But we just gotta stand tall and we gotta continue with this fight, and we gotta, because we up against all odds.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Definitely,
What was
definitely.
that moment though that made you, were missing child's birth?
well, as a youngster, my father wasn't in my life. So as a youngster, I always said whenever I have my first child, that's when I'm gonna be done.
Yeah.
With the streets. Unfortunately, my first child was born while I was in the car. I went to jail in front of my house, my wife was 7 months pregnant. So that was very heartbreaking. So for me, it was like, when you go into these systems, you always, okay, when I get out, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I did that 6 times prior to that. You see what I'm saying? So now, my last commitment, it was like, how do I start? First thing, get a GED. I've been there 5 times before, but I never thought about getting my GED. So get my GED, so when I do seek employment, I ain't got a lot. When they said, have you got a high school diploma or a GED? No, I got that. So that was my frame of fact, making it better for myself. And here it is, I've been doing intervention, 7 years? Yeah. About 7 years now. And let me tell you, I mean, you know, I wasn't a force of reckoning. You know what I mean? And his little homie is my brother-in-law. So I got it. You know what I mean? You know, so